Far beyond the known edges of the galaxy, where the stars seemed fewer and the darkness thicker, the Clither Dominion ruled with an iron grip. This alliance of alien species was feared and respected across countless systems, not just because of their advanced technology, but because of their unmatched skill in war. For centuries, the Clither had studied every conflict, every battle, every tactic used by species from the smallest miners on distant moons to the great warrior races in the galactic core. Their fleets moved with precision, their commanders thinking several steps ahead, like grandmasters playing a deadly game of chess. The Clither had built a reputation for never losing a war, crushing opponents with overwhelming firepower or strategic cunning. To them, war was a science, cold, efficient, predictable. So when their scouts picked up a signal of an unknown vessel approaching the outer borders of their territory, the Clither officers were hardly concerned. Reports came in quickly. A single ship, unrecognized in design, slow but sturdy. The aliens' initial suspicion was that this was a primitive race, barely able to manage basic space travel, let alone fight a proper battle the Clither had faced. Such species, many times before, they expected to dominate easily, to impose their will and expand their control without challenge. The ship was named USS Dauntless, but the Clither dismissed the name as meaningless, a human tradition lost to them in translation. What mattered more was the way the ship appeared on sensors, old-fashioned, large and clunky by their standards. It seemed more like a relic from an earlier age of space exploration than a threat to their supremacy. The Clither commanders convened. In their war room, screens flickering with images and star charts, voices calm but confident. "This is a minor incursion," one said, "no more than a stray scout from an unimportant backwater." Another added, "We will intercept and eliminate the vessel with minimal force. No reason to waste resources." The consensus was clear. Humans were not a serious enemy. Yet beneath their confident exterior, a flicker of curiosity arose. Dauntless did not act like other primitive vessels they had encountered. Its energy signatures were strange, its communications irregular, did not respond immediately to their hails, nor did it flee when warned. Instead, it held its position as if waiting. This puzzled the Clither. They were used to either swift retreat or submission when confronted by a superior force. But the humans aboard the Dauntless appeared calm and unshaken. The alien scouts approached closer, sending waves of probes and surveillance drones to analyze the ship's design and capabilities. The results were surprising. The Dauntless was built tough, with layers of armor that absorbed impacts better than expected. Its weapon systems, though not as advanced as Clither technology, showed an unusual combination of old and new. The Clither scientists noted the ship's engines were slower than their own, but they were built for endurance and stability rather than speed. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the USS Dauntless, Captain Morgan stood quietly, his eyes scanning the alien starfield beyond the thick windows. His crew worked in steady rhythm, checking systems and monitoring the distant flicker of enemy vessels that were beginning to gather. Morgan knew their arrival had not gone unnoticed, and he was prepared. Humanity's journey into the stars had been fraught with challenges, but they had learned one thing well: never underestimate the strength that comes from resolve and unity. The captain thought about how their ancestors had fought countless wars on Earth, wars that taught lessons no technology alone could provide. Here in the cold void, those lessons would be tested once again. As the Clither fleet closed in, their sleek ships glinting with deadly intent, a subtle tension filled the air. The aliens expected to intimidate the humans into surrender, believed their superior firepower and tactics would crush the Dauntless easily, but the humans showed no signs of panic. Instead, their silence spoke volumes. It was as if they understood something that Clither did not, that sometimes the most dangerous weapon is not the strongest laser or the fastest ship, but the spirit that refuses to back down. The distance between the two sides grew smaller, and the stars around them seemed to hold their breath. For the Clither, this encounter was just another minor threat to be erased. For the humans, it was a chance to prove that no matter how advanced an enemy might be, there was a power in determination. and courage that could not be measured by technology alone. The stage was set, and soon the first move would be made. Till then, the silence stretched, heavy and full of promise. What began as a simple patrol was about to become a legendary clash that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The Clither Dominion, confident in their superior technology and battle experience, swiftly deployed a fleet of sleek, fast cruisers to intercept the solitary human vessel, the USS Dauntless. These cruisers were marvels of alien engineering, glimmering silver and black, equipped with advanced sensors and weapons that could strike with precision from great distances. As they closed in on the human ship, the Clither commanders expected an easy victory, one that would reaffirm their dominance and dismiss humanity as just another weak race in the vast universe. The Dauntless, however, did not react with panic or confusion. Instead, its crew remained calm, moving with quiet efficiency. The humans sent a clear message through their communications channels, a polite but firm request for peaceful dialogue. Their voice was steady, without any hint of fear or aggression, which only perplexed the Clither officers. Why would such a primitive ship display such calm? Humans seemed almost too confident, as if they knew something the Clither did not. For a moment the cruisers held their position, allowing the two sides to exchange words across the void of space. The Clither hailed the Dauntless with a tone that combined warning and dismissal, expecting the humans to surrender or retreat immediately. Instead, the human captain, Morgan, responded with a quiet strength, emphasizing their right to explore and defend themselves if necessary. The calm, measured diplomacy only deepened the Clither's confusion and growing frustration. They had never faced an opponent so unyielding in the face of overwhelming odds. As negotiations stalled, tensions began to rise. The Clither fleet commanders debated their next move, aware that hesitation could be seen as weakness. Eventually, the decision was made. The Clither would strike first to demonstrate their power and force the humans to yield. The order was given, and weapon systems hummed to life, casting eerie glows across the bridges of the alien cruisers. Suddenly, without warning, the Clither launched their attack. Energy beams streaked across the empty space, aimed directly at the Dauntless. But instead of retreating or collapsing under the assault, the human battleship reacted with a surprising toughness. Its hull absorbed the initial strikes better than expected, thanks to layers of reinforced armor designed to withstand heavy damage. The ship maneuvered not with speed, but with surprising agility, weaving through the oncoming fire in ways the Clither had not predicted. The humans fought back with a mix of tactics that seemed almost chaotic, but were deeply calculated. They fired volleys of missiles that tracked in unusual patterns, forcing the cruisers to scatter defensively. The Dauntless deployed electronic countermeasures that disrupted Clither targeting systems, creating confusion among the alien pilots. Every move the humans made was unconventional, unpredictable. The Clither commanders found themselves scrambling to adapt to a fighting style they had never encountered before. Their fleet, once so confident and orderly, now struggled to keep up with the resilience and cleverness of a single human ship. The humans' refusal to yield or retreat baffled the Clither even more. While other races had crumbled at the sight of their ships, these humans stood firm, their morale unwavering. Captain Morgan directed his crew with steady hands, knowing that their strength was not just in technology, but in willpower and unity. The Dauntless seemed almost alive with a spirit that went beyond its metal and circuits. As the battle dragged on, the Clither cruisers began to suffer serious damage. Their fast strikes no longer held the advantage. Their formations broke under the persistent counterattacks. Alien pilots whispered among themselves, questioning if this human vessel was truly as simple as they first believed. They watched in stunned silence as the Dauntless endured hit after hit, adapting quickly and retaliating with growing confidence. The more the Clither attacked, the more they realized they were facing something unique, a force not built solely on superior technology, but on the strength of a crew determined to survive and protect what they held dear. The battle was no longer a simple demonstration of power. It had become a test of wills. The Clither found their pride shaken. Their calculations, their centuries of experience, failed to prepare them for the raw resilience and unpredictability of the human ship. The Dauntless proved that even an older design, seemingly outclassed in speed and firepower, could stand tall against a fleet with heart and strategy. With every moment that passed, the alien commanders grew more cautious, their earlier confidence replaced by a grudging respect. Though the Clithers still held the advantage in numbers and technology, the humans had shown a refusal to surrender that cast doubt over what was supposed to be an easy victory. As the skirmish continued, both sides were forced to reconsider their assumptions. The Clither had come to dominate the stars through logic and overwhelming force. But here was a new variable, a species willing to fight with unpredictability and courage. The Dauntless was no longer just a ship. It was a symbol of human tenacity, a reminder that war was not only a game of weapons, but also a test of spirit. Space around them crackled with energy and tension, as two very different worlds clashed. Neither side could predict what would come next, but one thing was clear. The war the Clither thought they understood had suddenly become something far more dangerous. The humans had arrived, and they were ready to prove that no matter how advanced an enemy might be, the heart of a fighter could never be underestimated. The battle between the USS Dauntless and the Clither fleet reached a fierce and brutal climax. As both sides fought with every ounce of strength and strategy they had, the Clither, confident in their superior numbers and advanced technology, pressed their attack hard, but the humans had no intention of surrendering or slipping into retreat. Captain Morgan, standing firm on the bridge of the Dauntless, watched as the enemy ships closed in once more, their weapons charged and aimed to overwhelm. Yet what happened next stunned even the most experienced Clither commanders.
The Dauntless
Unleashed a barrage unlike anything the aliens had faced before, targeting weak points in the cruisers that their sensors had failed to detect. Using a combination of older Earth combat knowledge and new innovations, the humans struck precisely where the Clither ship's armor was thinnest, their shields weakest. It was a move born not just from calculation, but from a willingness to take risks the cold, logical aliens considered reckless. The Dauntless's weapons fired in rapid succession, missiles with unpredictable trajectories, pulse lasers that overloaded enemy defenses, and electronic pulses that scrambled enemy targeting systems at critical moments. Each hit was devastating, and the Clither fleet, which had seemed invincible moments before, began to suffer serious damage. Explosions lit up the void as several cruisers were disabled or destroyed, their once formidable formations breaking apart under the relentless human assault. The Clither crews, trained for precise and orderly combat, struggled to respond to the humans' unexpected and creative tactics. Their usual advantage in technology seemed less certain against a force that could adapt so quickly and attack from unexpected angles. As the battle wore on, it became clear that the tide was turning. The humans did not fight like the alien races the Clither had studied for centuries. Instead of relying solely on superior firepower or strategy, the Dauntless's crew used their adaptability and grit, changing tactics on the fly and refusing to be pinned down. Captain Morgan's voice remained calm but commanding, inspiring his crew to push forward with determination. The humans' willingness to embrace danger, to fight fiercely, even when the odds were against them, was something the Clither had never truly understood. To them, war was a game of numbers and machines, not a battle of wills and spirit. Yet here, in the cold emptiness of space, the human spirit shone brighter than any star. The Clither commanders gathered in urgent conferences, their confidence shaken. Their once certain victory now seemed far from assured. They had expected the humans to crumble under pressure, but instead, the Dauntless grew stronger, using every hit to learn and improve. The aliens began to respect the humans' creativity, how they combined old-fashioned daring with modern technology to keep the fight alive. One Clither officer admitted quietly, "They fight not just with their weapons, but with their hearts." The realization settled like a cold weight across the Dominion's forces. They had underestimated the human spirit, that deep, unyielding drive to survive and protect, no matter the cost. The battle's turning point was not just the damage dealt, but the shift in morale. The Clither ships, once symbols of unstoppable power, now carried the heavy burden of doubt. The humans, despite their smaller numbers and older ship design, moved with renewed energy, their unity and resolve pushing them past exhaustion. This was more than a war of technology. It was a clash of ideals. The Clither believed that logic and control would always win. The humans proved that courage and adaptability could overcome even the most precise strategies. As the skirmish reached its peak, the Dauntless continued to press its advantage, weaving through enemy fire and striking again where the Clither least expected. The aliens' formations fractured, their plans unraveling under the relentless human assault. With every cruiser disabled or forced to retreat, the humans' confidence grew. They fought not just for survival, but to show the galaxy that the human race was more than just a newcomer. They were a force to be reckoned with. The aftermath of the skirmish left the Clither fleet battered and questioning their assumptions. The humans had turned what seemed a hopeless battle into a testament of endurance and creativity. The Dauntless itself bore scars from the fight, yet it stood proud and unyielding, a symbol of the indomitable human spirit. The Clither commanders faced a new reality. They could no longer dismiss humanity as insignificant or predictable in this vast universe where stars burn and civilizations rise and fall. The humans had carved out a place not through technology, alone, but through an unbreakable will to survive and adapt. The battle had changed everything. What started as a routine encounter had become a legendary moment, one that would be remembered not just by humans but by all who witnessed it across the stars. The Clither Dominion would have to rethink their understanding of war. For humanity had shown them that the heart of a fighter was the most dangerous weapon of all. As the shock of their losses began to settle, the Clither Dominion realized that the humans aboard the USS Dauntless were not a minor inconvenience, but a growing threat to their long-standing rule over the stars. Their pride wounded, the Clither High Command made a fateful decision to deploy their deadliest weaponry. Systems so powerful and destructive that they had been held back for only the most dangerous foes. Massive warships, shaped like floating blades and pulsing with dark energy, began to emerge from hyperspace around the battle zone. These dreadnoughts carried weapons that could tear moons apart and defenses designed to block nearly all known forms of attack. The Clither believed that with this show of overwhelming force, they would end the conflict once and for all. But on the bridge of the Dauntless, Captain Morgan and his crew did not falter. They had come too far to give up now. What they faced was terrifying, yet the crew stood united, driven not just by orders, but by a belief in one another. Knowing they could not match the Clither in firepower, the humans turned instead to what they knew: best creativity, adaptability, and teamwork. Drawing from centuries of Earth naval history, Captain Morgan ordered maneuvers once used in ancient sea battles, adjusted and evolved for space. Feint attacks, sudden dives into asteroid fields, and deceptive positioning confused the Clither dreadnoughts, who were used to enemies behaving according to patterns. The Dauntless darted in and out of danger, drawing enemy fire away from weaker Allied ships and striking with precision when opportunities appeared. Their moves weren't based on pre-programmed logic, but on human instinct, shaped by countless generations of surviving the impossible. As the Dauntless continued its daring dance against impossible odds, something unexpected began to happen. Signals came in from distant parts of the sector's small outposts. Independent colonies and even rival factions who had long feared the Clither now began to watch the humans with growing admiration. Stories spread quickly across communication networks of a single Earth ship standing firm against a fleet that had crushed hundreds of worlds. Some neutral species began quietly offering support fuel, intelligence, even small fighter wings. Former enemies of humanity started to reconsider their positions, drawn not by politics, but by the courage they saw on display. The humans had become more than just fighters. They had become symbols of defiance and hope. Inside the Clither command, Center's unease grew with every hour. The Dominion's rigid doctrines, once unquestioned, were now under silent scrutiny. Junior officers began whispering doubts, asking why their tactics failed to break the humans. Some started experimenting with unapproved strategies, desperate to adapt, while others hesitated mid-battle, confused by the unpredictability of their opponents. The once perfect harmony of the Clither war machine began to fracture under the weight of something it had never encountered before, human unpredictability fueled by an unshakable will. And still the Dauntless pressed forward. Systems were strained, its hull battered, and its crew exhausted, yet the ship refused to fall. Every member of the crew, from engineers in the reactor core to gunners in the lower decks, worked as one. Each small decision, each tiny act of bravery, added up to something greater than the sum of its parts. Even in silence, their actions shouted a clear message to the galaxy. Humanity would not be broken. In the chaos of the growing war, one moment stood out a direct confrontation between the Dauntless and the Clither dreadnought Valkyrie, the largest warship ever built by the Dominion. As the two ships met in a narrow corridor of space near a drifting debris field, the Valkyrie unleashed a wave of energy that tore nearby asteroids apart. Most commanders would have retreated, but Captain Morgan ordered a bold charge directly through the debris, using it to confuse enemy sensors. With shields straining and alarms screaming, the Dauntless slipped in close. Launching a focus strike to a vent port the Clither had never thought needed defending. The explosion didn't destroy the dreadnought, but it wounded its pride ant. More importantly, it proved that even the greatest weapon could be hurt. The clash rippled across the battlefront, shaking the confidence of many Clither and energizing the allies who now rallied behind the humans. By now, the war was no longer about resources or territory. It had become a battle of wills. The Clither fought to maintain their order, their control, their belief in a system that had never before failed them. The humans fought for something deeper, for freedom, for survival, and for the belief that the impossible could be challenged. As both sides drew back to regroup, the stars seemed to hold their breath, aware that something had shifted in the balance of power. The Dauntless, though damaged and outnumbered, had done more than survive it, had forced an empire to question itself, and across the galaxy, beings who had once felt small and powerless now looked to the humans not as strangers, but as examples of what courage could become when forged by fire. The final chapter of this conflict was not yet written, but one truth had become undeniable: the human spirit, though born on a single distant world, had begun to echo among the stars. The final battle came like a storm that had been building for too long, and when it arrived, the galaxy held its breath. The Clither Dominion, determined to reclaim their pride and reassert their dominance, gathered everything they had: hundreds of warships, experimental weapons, and elite commanders from across their empire. At the heart of a growing coalition, small, scattered groups of former enemies, neutral species, and independent colonies who had chosen to follow the example set by a single ship, the USS Dauntless, floating at the front lines, its hull scorched and patched from countless battles. The Dauntless didn't look like a hero's vessel, but in the eyes of many, it had become a symbol of what humanity stood for: resilience, unity, and a spirit that refused to bend. The battle was fierce beyond anything either side had imagined. The Clither's final strike was a display of raw power, wave after wave of coordinated attacks meant to finally break the humans' resistance. The sky above the battleground burned with trails of energy, shattered debris, and distant flashes that marked the end of proud ships on both sides. Yet even in the face of overwhelming odds, the humans didn't fall back. They moved together with a rhythm born from trust and experience, their actions woven into one seamless effort. Captain Morgan led the Dauntless into the heart of the conflict, not with arrogance, but with calm resolve. Using strategies inspired by ancient Earthsea battles and modern space warfare, the humans outmaneuvered the enemy in unexpected ways, drawing them into traps, using decoys, and turning the terrain itself into an ally. When the Clither unleashed a weapon that tore apart the shields of multiple allied vessels, the humans responded not with fear but with bold action. Sacrificing ships to protect others and pushing forward with renewed strength, slowly the balance shifted. One by one, the Clither dreadnoughts were disabled or forced to retreat. Their precise formations, once symbols of control, began to fall into confusion as their commanders struggled to understand how such a small, seemingly fragile force could resist their might. And then, after hours of relentless combat, when the battlefield fell quiet and the smoke cleared, the Dauntless was still standing scarred, but not broken. The Clither flagship, surrounded and outmaneuvered, powered down its weapons. It was a victory, yes, but not the kind written in destruction. What happened next surprised everyone. Instead of pressing their advantage, instead of demanding surrender or revenge, the humans opened a channel and offered peace. Captain Morgan's message was broadcast across all frequencies, his voice tired but steady as he spoke of a future, not shaped by domination, but by understanding. "We did not come here to conquer," he said. "We came to survive. We offer you a choice to fight until nothing is left, or to stand with us and build something better." Silence followed, long and uncertain, as the Clither processed the offer. To many it was unthinkable. These humans had every right to claim vengeance or territory. But they didn't. They had already proven their strength, and now they were offering something even greater: mercy. Slowly, carefully, the Clither accepted. Their commanders, once proud and unbending, lowered their heads and acknowledged what had been made clear. War was not just a test of weapons, but of character. The Clither had seen a force they had never accounted for: the human will to rise. Again and again, no matter the cost. As peace talks began and warships were powered down, stories of the Dauntless spread like wildfire across the stars. It became more than just a ship. It became a legend. On distant planets, children spoke of its daring moves and brave crew. In quiet corners of the galaxy, oppressed people felt a new kind of hope, believing that maybe, just maybe, they too could rise. The humans had not only changed the course of a war, they had changed the hearts of those who once saw them as nothing, more than newcomers to a vast and ancient galaxy. And as the Clither began to rewrite their doctrines and question the cold logic they had followed for centuries, they looked toward humanity not with fear, but with respect. The war had ended. Not with annihilation, but with understanding. And the final victory was not in who had fallen, but in what had been learned. The Dauntless, now returning to Earth's space with honor and memory etched into its metal bones, carried with it a story the stars would never forget, a story of defiance, unity, and a spirit too strong to break. Humanity, once overlooked, had become a beacon in the darker, reminder that strength is not only found in machines and firepower, but in the courage to choose peace when it would be easier to choose destruction.